As I stood at the head of the formal dining table, hearing my husband, Adam, gloating about his latest investment success to his family, the crystal wine glass trembled in my palm. It was always the same, his portrayal of the self-made man, taking credit for everything while hardly addressing reality. My jaw tightened as I positioned the roast that I had spent hours preparing and paid for with my own hard-earned money. If only they knew. "Sarah's just lucky I handle all of our finances," Adam said with a smug expression on his face, while his family agreed, feeding his ego. His sister Emily let out a high-pitched laugh that always got on my nerves. "Oh, I remember when she was only answering phones at that bank. She's really moved up, hasn't she?" I mustered a grin as I carefully filled my mother-in-law Diana's wine glass. She was dressed in a fashionable gown that I had given her as a gift last Christmas, but Adam had taken full credit. "Would you like more wine, Diana?" "Oh, yes, dear," she said, patting my hand condescendingly. "You know, Sarah, you should let Adam handle the finances. Men simply comprehend these things better. My Harold always told women not to bother their pretty heads over such things." I held back a sarcastic laugh. They had no idea. I had been secretly tracking Adam's financial maneuvers for months. I documented every dubious transaction, suspected offshore account, and business dinner with his young secretary Jessica. Nobody guessed that I, the simple secretary they all assumed I was, had been silently watching and learning. As CEO of one of the city's leading financial institutions, I had a unique perspective. Adam had no idea what I knew. That's precisely how I wanted it. "Sarah's great with the small stuff," Adam said, waving his wine glass about, "running the household, organizing dinner parties. But the big decisions, well, that's why I handle all of that." I restrained a smile. "I assumed you had no knowledge." I set the final dish on the table and smoothed down the fabric of my Chanel dress. Adam assumed he had paid for another transaction, but truly I paid for it with my own money, which he had no idea I was quietly accumulating while he brags about his financial genius. Adam remained the center of attention throughout the dinner, with everyone praising his efforts, but I was watching, listening, calculating. They never questioned why we lived in such luxury or how we could afford the huge vacation homes, costly automobiles, and wines that Adam enjoyed flaunting. They simply assumed it was all him, all Adam. As the talk drifted away from Adam's success, my father-in-law Harold interjected, "Tom tells me you're still working at that bank. Wouldn't it be preferable to concentrate on home life, perhaps starting a family?" I took a cautious drink of wine while resisting the impulse to roll my eyes. "I appreciate staying occupied. The bank has been performing nicely." Adam, evidently angry that the subject had veered away from him, chimed in. "I just made another excellent investment. We doubled our money in a week." He winked at his sister. "Of course, Sarah doesn't need to worry about those details." I smiled nicely and tried not to chuckle. Adam had no idea that I had been closely watching his brilliant investments, all of which were depleting our joint finances. I had copies of everything: the unlawful loans from corporate accounts, the shell businesses he had been setting up with business funds, everything. Adam had absolutely no suspicions. "Tell them about your promotion, dear," I advised, my tone cool and controlled. "Oh, right," Adam beams. "Senior Vice President of Operations." "Honestly, the title is just a formality. I've been running things for several months now." I smiled inwardly, thinking about the board meeting I had set for tomorrow morning. Adam had no idea that his promotion was part of an internal probe I had launched months earlier. As CEO, I was required to maintain certain standards of honesty, and Adam's activities were beginning to cross the line. The evening continued, with the typical dynamic: Adam bragging, his family gushing over him, and me playing the silent, supportive wife. But within, I was gathering facts and preparing my case. "Sarah," Diana said as I served the potatoes, "these are a little dry. Perhaps if you spent more time honing your cooking rather than pretending to be a businesswoman, they might turn out better." I smiled softly. "You're correct, Diana. Practice makes perfect, similar to how I documented Adam's false behavior." His faults were building up, and I was determined to make sure he paid the consequences. After supper, after Adam had gone to his study to make another late-night call, I went down to my desk to finalize the preparations for the board meeting. I had everything: audit trails, transaction records, and security footage from Adam's dinners with Jessica. Everything was in place. "Everything's ready for tomorrow," I texted Jessica, my head of internal security and Adam's assistant. She said promptly, "I'm ready to go." What Adam didn't realize was that Jessica wasn't just his assistant. She was working for me, following his every move, documenting every email and indecent discussion. Everything was carefully curated in preparation for this moment. I heard Adam chuckling in his study, definitely on the phone with one of his business colleagues, talking about his latest win. Allow him to laugh. Tomorrow would be an appropriate time for revelations. I smiled to myself, feeling satisfied. I had everything in order. Tomorrow I'll finally take control. Tomorrow Adam will learn who he was married to and how wrong he had been in underestimating me. And the best part? He had no idea what was going to happen. The next morning, I arrived at the bank's headquarters at precisely 7 a.m. The glass facade of the skyscraper glittered in the early sunlight, reflecting the precise lines of modern design. I placed my car in the allocated CEO spot, something Adam had never noticed during his infrequent office visits. It was almost poetic. He never realized the significance of the life I'd created. As I strolled through the lobby, I let the sound of my heels clicking on the marble floor calm me. The staff greeted me warmly, oblivious of the impending storm lurking beneath the surface. Adam had already departed for the day, thrilled with his promotion announcement. He kissed my cheek and reminded me not to spend too much money today. I laughed, kissed him again, and waved him goodbye as he drove away in the fancy car I had gotten him for Christmas. If only he understood the truth. Jessica was already waiting for me in the elevator with her tablet in hand. "Everything's ready," she remarked, her tone professional, but with a trace of satisfaction in her gaze. The board members arrived early, and the audit team had prepared a presentation. Adam is in his office, prepping his speech. I nodded, holding back a smile. "Good. Let's make sure everything happens as planned." By 8:55, the boardroom was packed, and Adam was virtually bouncing in his seat, ready to revel in the glory of his impending promotion. I entered the room with a steady, calculated stride, commanding attention. As soon as I walked in, the room fell silent, and Adam's puzzled expression met mine. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" "The secretaries usually just leave the coffee," he explained, his voice tinted with perplexity and disdain. I did not flinch. "Actually, Adam," I said, taking my place at the head of the table, "I called this meeting." I motioned to Bradley, my assistant, who started handing out files to everyone. "We have a few items to discuss." Adam's face froze as he gazed down at the paperwork in front of him. His gaze wandered from page to page as his confidence dwindled. He didn't know what he was looking at. "CEO?" he stammered, disbelief creeping into his voice. "But you're just a secretary." I smiled, my voice silky, and said, "That was quite a few promotions ago, sweetheart. You were too preoccupied with our finances to notice." The board members exchanged glances, some covering smiles behind their hands, and others observing with rapt concentration. Adam's face was drained of color as he began scanning through the documents, comprehending what he was reading. Photos of his dinners with Jessica, detailed records of his illicit transfers, and emails describing his plans to pilfer monies were all available. Each piece of evidence was meticulously prepared, demonstrating his hubris and the betrayal he never saw coming. "This is a mistake," he said quietly, his hands shaking. "I can explain." I did not let him finish. "Oh, I'm sure you can," I replied. "Just as you can explain the offshore account you opened last month, or the shell businesses you established using company monies. All those amazing investments you talk about to your family?" I leaned forward slightly. "I've been tracking all of them, Adam. You assumed they were hidden. They were not." The room was still. The board members were all looking at Adam now, some with sympathy, others with interest. His world was disintegrating. Adam's voice cracked as he said, "But our house, the cars." "My house," I informed him, "is actually my grandmother's house. And the automobiles, vacation homes, and wines you enjoyed showing off to your family were all purchased with my money." "My money, not yours." A murmur spread around the room. A few of the board members exchanged uneasy glances, recognizing how much they had been duped by Adam's pleasant demeanor. They had believed every statement and concluded that every extravagance was the consequence of his alleged financial prowess. But in actuality, everything had been mine. Mrs. Chen, one of the board members, a man named Greg, interrupted cautiously, "Should we proceed with official accusations?" "Yes," I replied, nodding toward Jessica. She moved forward, holding up another stack of documents. "Adam," Jessica stated calmly and professionally, "you're being terminated for cause, effective immediately. The proof of your embezzlement has been submitted to the appropriate authorities. Security personnel will accompany you to your office to get your personal things." Adam's face contorted with fear. "You can't do this to me," he yelled. "I am your husband." I selected another document from my folder. "Actually, Adam," I explained with a forced smile, "these are divorce papers. Given the proof of your financial malfeasance and several affairs, my lawyers anticipate that this process will be rather uncomplicated." Adam's hands were shaking now, his customary confidence shattered. "You can't?" he said, unable to form logical thoughts. The security team entered silently, waited at the door, waiting to take him out. Adam's frantic gaze went from person to person in the room, and for the first time, he appeared to grasp that everyone knew who he was, and who I was. "My family will never believe this," Adam continued, his voice full of despair. I tapped my phone, and the boardroom screen displayed a video feed. Adam's family could be seen on the TV, sitting in the reception area and watching a live presentation of his actions. "They believed they were here to celebrate your promotion," I replied softly. "But now they're learning the truth. They will witness everything: embezzlement, affairs, and falsehoods. They'll realize that you had nothing to do with the presents, vacations, and luxury you claimed credit for." Adam collapsed into his chair, defeated. "How long did you know?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "From the beginning," I said calmly. "I am the CEO of a bank, Adam. Did you honestly believe I wouldn't notice?" As the security team approached to escort him out, I slumped back in my chair, feeling the weight of everything that had led up to this point. The years of observing, waiting, and gathering evidence have finally paid off. Adam had underestimated me, and now he would pay the consequences. As Adam was led out of the boardroom, the silence was almost painful. The board members sat transfixed, their gazes shifting between him and me as if waiting for anything more. But there was nothing left to say. I had spoken all that needed to be said. When Adam exited the room, I turned to my assistant, Bradley. "Make sure the board members are comfortable," I added quietly. "We'll begin the next item of the agenda shortly." I watched as the security team escorted Adam out of the building. His expression was one of shock and wrath, a far cry from the arrogant confidence he had strolled in with. It felt almost too easy, too clean. The truth, once revealed, cuts through all the years of lies and deception, like a hot knife through butter. When the door closed behind him, I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Jessica, who stood silently by my side, gave me a knowing glance. She has been on my side at every stage of this. She had contributed to the collection of all evidence, conversations with auditors, and surveillance film. Today marked the end of months of painstaking planning, and now that it was over, I felt calm, like the center of a storm. "Everything's going to plan," she murmured softly. I nodded, a slight smile forming on the edges of my lips. "It's perfect." The next stage was to ensure that Adam's family had the entire picture. He would no longer be able to hide behind their ignorance. I'd already prepared for this. The screen in the reception area had previously shown a live stream of the board meeting. Now it would show a taped film of Adam's most embarrassing moments. His family could see everything, including his secret accounts and fabricated transactions. I did not feel sad for them. I didn't feel sorry for his mother, Barbara, who had always belittled me and regarded me as the ungrateful daughter-in-law who didn't know her place. I didn't feel sorry for his sister, Jennifer, who had always treated me condescendingly, figuring I was just a lucky secretary who had married up. And I didn't feel terrible for his father, Harold, who had frequently hailed Adam as the family's financial genius, while dismissing me as the one who was just along for the trip. They had no notion of Adam's abilities. They found out today. I gave myself a fleeting moment of satisfaction. The actual job was only beginning. I returned my focus to the boardroom, where the members were still contemplating what they had just seen. Some appeared uneasy, while others looked at me with renewed respect. It wasn't about money or power. I didn't need their approval. But there was something satisfying about seeing their expressions shift and their assumptions fall in real time. "Should we continue?" I asked, my voice firm and businesslike. Marcus, a senior executive and board member, cleared his throat. "Yes, let's move on." I nodded and returned to the agenda, as if nothing had changed, despite the fact that everything had. The documentation was already in place, so the next step in my plan was simple. I would assume Adam's place. As the bank's top shareholder, I already owned a controlling position. Today, I would ensure that the board understood who they were dealing with. The remainder of the meeting passed in a blur. The board members spoke on the imminent merger, strategic initiatives, and the bank's future growth. I listened intently, sharing my insights as needed. Every now and then I could feel their eyes on me, attempting to grasp the reality of who I was now and who I had always been. By the end of the meeting, I could sense a shift in the room. The attitude had shifted from one of polite detachment to quiet reverence. Even Marcus, who had previously dismissed my role in the firm as a formality, seems to grasp now that I was more than just a CEO in title. I was the one who had been making major decisions for years. Adam had been playing a game, believing he was in charge, but he had never realized that I was the one pulling the strings from the beginning. I rose up and closed the folder in front of me, keeping my hands steady. "Thank you, everyone, for your time," I murmured as I stood to go. "I trust we're all on the same page about how to proceed?" The board responded with murmurs of agreement. Some nodded, while others were still processing the events of the morning. But they all knew one thing now. I was in charge. Nothing was going to change that. After the board members had left, I sat back in my chair for a moment, allowing the serenity to wash over me. The phone on my desk buzzed, bringing me back to the present. I glanced at the screen, which displayed an incoming message from my lawyer. Divorce papers were filed. "Everything is running smoothly. You are in the clear." I let out a quiet breath as the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. Adam was finished. The bank would thrive under my guidance, and his influence would be completely removed from our lives. But that was not all. I had one final move to make. I paused to breathe in the quiet of the office. The morning had been a frenzy of disclosures, but now that everything had been revealed, I felt calm. A sense of calm that comes from knowing I had played the game better than anyone could have anticipated. Adam had no idea what was coming, which was the most satisfying aspect. He believed he was in control, that he could outwit me, and that I was simply the faithful wife, content to play the supporting role. But I had been arranging everything from the beginning. The phone vibrated again. This time, Jessica sent a message. "The family has witnessed everything. They are furious. Barbara is phoning nonstop. Should I block her?" I smirked as my fingers hovered over the keyboard. "No. Let her vent. I'll handle her later." I had a plan for them, too. I didn't only want to expose Adam's lies. I wanted to ensure that his family realized the entire scope of his deception. Barbara, Jennifer, and Harold had been enabling his behavior for years, feeding his ego and leading him to believe that he could do no wrong. They had contributed to his hubris. They would now have to confront the repercussions of their complacency. I glanced at the time. It was nearly midday, and I had invited Adam's family to join me in the executive dining room. I had prepared a particularly spectacular supper for them, one they would not forget. There'd be no more faking, no more gushing about Adam's alleged intelligence. Today, they'd discover who had been carrying the weight of this family all along. As I walked to the dining room, I felt a tinge of eagerness. This was not about vengeance in the classic sense. It was all about control. It was about regaining what had been taken from me. Years of denigrating, relentless undercutting of my abilities, and the idea that I was simply a lucky secretary. It was all coming to a head. They would finally see who they had been looking down on all these years. When I arrived, the family had already been seated. The anxiety in the air was palpable. Barbara was still noticeably shaken, her eyes darting around the room as if looking for an explanation. Jennifer appeared to have just taken a bitter pill, whilst Harold's expression was harsh and hostile. They hadn't talked with me since the board meeting, and I didn't expect them to now. But that was fine. I wasn't here to talk with them. I was here to show them what they hadn't seen. "Good afternoon," I said, my voice firm and confident. "I hope you all are hungry." "The food should arrive shortly." Barbara drew a hesitant breath, her eyes narrowing. "What is this supposed to be?" she inquired, her tone dripping with contempt. I held her eyes without flinching. "This is where I work," I explained simply. "This is the bank you've always been proud of. The one you imagined was based on Adam's alleged intelligence. The one you thought was all his doing." I stopped, allowing the words to sink in. But it wasn't. It was mine. The room went silent. Jennifer opened her lips to speak, but I held up a hand to stop her. "No one is going to interrupt me," I snarled, my voice piercing as the crack of a whip. "You've spent years treating me as if I were nothing more than a trophy wife, unworthy of any of my accomplishments. You've all let Adam convince you that he was the mastermind, the one who orchestrated everything. So, now you know the truth." The door to the dining room opened, and the server brought in the first of many courses. I offered him a little nod of appreciation as he set down the food before moving on. "You assumed Adam was responsible for everything, including the house, cars, and trips. You assumed he was the one paying for everything. But you were mistaken. All of this comes from me, my work, my effort, my sacrifice. Not his." Barbara's face turned crimson with rage, and she opened her lips to speak, but I did not allow her the opportunity. "Let me make one thing clear," I said. "You have all participated in Adam's falsehoods. You've turned a blind eye to his behavior, his repeated manipulations, and the way he exploited me, but that ends today. Today, you will see who he truly is." I turned to face the waiter, who was now standing behind me, waiting for my cue. "Please show them the video," I asked, referring to the screen on the far wall. The crowd became even hushed as the video stream began. Adam's voice rang through the speakers, boasting about his alleged financial triumphs, gloating about his investments, and making promises to his family that we both knew he couldn't make. The tape moved to scenes of him dining with Jessica, joking with her, and holding hands under the table. Everything that had previously been hidden from his family was suddenly shown. Barbara's expression was one of shock and humiliation. She had always been convinced of Adam's greatness. How would she react now that she has discovered the truth? Jennifer's face appeared pale and drawn, as if she was about to cry. And Harold? He stared at the TV, his eyes wide with shock. The powerful Adam, whom they had all worshipped, was nothing but a sham. The video stopped, and the room was silent. No one dared to say up, despite the fact that the tension was palpable. "That," I murmured softly, breaking the silence, "is who you've been defending for years. And now you understand why I kept my distance, because I understood who he truly was. And I realized who I truly was." I stood up, my voice clear and cold. "I hope you enjoy your lunch. It will be your last supper together as a family, for there will be no more pretending after this. Adam is gone, and I am now in command. As for you?" I hesitated, allowing the words to hang in the air. "I do not owe you any explanations, but I'll say this, you should have paid more attention." As I exited the room, the door closed behind me, leaving Adam's family to deal with the situation. They wouldn't look at me the same way again. And what about Adam? Well, he was already gone. The aftermath of that lunch was immediate and severe, yet I remained unaffected. The power shift was already obvious. As I sat in my office later that afternoon, studying the bank's most recent performance statistics, I allowed myself a little moment of satisfaction. My ideas, which I had quietly carried out for years, were now coming together. Adam, my estranged spouse, was nothing but a victim of his own arrogance. I had been watching him for years, playing the role of the dutiful wife, patiently tolerating his insults and scorn, but I'd always known what he was and wasn't. Adam was neither the financial genius he purported to be, nor the architect behind our lifestyle. That was me, the one he never tried to genuinely comprehend. He assumed I was just the secretary who got lucky. Now I was the one in charge. Everything I had worked for, promotions, commercial deals, the position I had carved out for myself, was now being recognized by the world. Nobody would ever mistake me for anything less than a powerhouse. I picked up my phone and noticed a news alert. Adam Chen pleads guilty to embezzlement charges, sentenced to 5 years in prison. I took a modest breath of relief. That was the end of the road for him. But it wasn't just the sentence that counted. It was the fact that the world had finally recognized him for what he was, a fraud. And in a strange way, I owed him appreciation as well. Without his acts, I would not have had the opportunity to properly shine. The Addams family, too, was reeling. Jessica had informed me that Barbara had been attempting to contact me, leaving left after voicemail, demanding answers and pleading for forgiveness. However, there was no forgiveness to be received. The damage was done. They had all contributed to Adam's elevation, allowing him to deceive them into believing he was a hero. Now they were all dealing with the consequences of their naive commitment. Jennifer's attempts to contact me were equally unsuccessful. She had sent multiple texts apologizing for her previous actions, for her condescending remarks, and for believing I was beneath her. But the apologies came too late. There was no going back. I did not need their approval. I didn't need anybody's approval. Later that day, I received another call, this time from my lawyer, who updated me on the status of the divorce process. The paperwork was finalized, and everything was finished. Everything I had lawfully earned over the years, including assets and properties, was now legally mine. There was no longer a question of who had the right to the life we had created. "Are you sure you want to proceed with the entire settlement?" my lawyer inquired, as if there was any doubt left. "We can still negotiate, though it's likely he'll accept the terms without protest." "Move forward," I said forcefully. "Let him keep the little dignity he has left. I will take the rest." My lawyer paused for a time before agreeing. There was no point dragging this out any longer. I'd already won. Adam's fate was sealed the instant he misjudged me, and as for his family, they would learn the hard way that you cannot simply assume someone is less capable because they do not meet your limited definition of success. The evening arrived, and I was once again alone in my office. The gentle hum of the metropolis outside my window was calming, a reminder of how far I'd come. A reminder that I had built everything on my own, with no support or belief in myself. I'd been underestimated my entire life. First by Adam, then by his family, and then by the entire world. But in the end, it was their underestimate that gave me the courage to do what they never thought I could. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of everything descend on me. I had nothing more to prove to anyone. I had constructed my empire piece by piece and brick by brick, and now I'd push it to new heights. The phone buzzed again, this time with a message from one of the board members. "Congratulations! You've been nominated for a merger that may elevate you to the ranks of the nation's most influential CEOs. The entire board is behind you." I smiled to myself. The timing could not have been more ideal. Adam's ruin was merely the beginning. Now that the world was watching, I was ready to show them who I really was, not the secretary, not the devoted wife, But there was one woman who had been quietly creating an empire while everyone else underestimated her. Tomorrow will be a new day. This time, everyone would know my name. A few months later, everything became even more strange. The media attention around Adam's fall had subsided, but the consequences of his actions remained. His imprisonment had only marked the beginning of his disintegration, and it wasn't long before rumors circulated about his pitiful attempts to start a new life after prison. Women were hesitant to date him. Who would want to be engaged with a convicted embezzler? His past now defines him. In contrast, I was doing quite well. My success continued to develop, my bank's revenues increased, and my reputation was solidified. But I wasn't finished yet. The merger proposal I'd received was monumental. It would solidify my position among the financial world's elite. My phone buzzed as I sat at my desk one evening, reviewing the merger paperwork. The message came from an unknown number. "Can we talk?" "It's me, Adam." I stared at the screen for a long time. I had no intention of reopening the door. The past was behind me, but curiosity got the better of me. I tapped the screen to open the message. "I know you hate me. I know I messed up. But I was wrong about you. I didn't realize who you were until it was too late. You were always the one in control, always smarter than me. You deserve everything you've built." I read it again. The man who had attempted to destroy me and mocked my every action was now appreciating my strength. I sat back in my chair and considered how far I had come. I had created my existence from nothing, and it was now mine, unchanged, unshakable. Adam had been a blip in the radar. I did not respond to his message. It wasn't bitterness or anger that prevented me from responding. I simply didn't need to. As I stood up from my desk and gazed out the window at the city below, I realized that my actual power rested in this moment, not requiring anyone's validation. I had transformed into everything they had doubted I could be, and I was only getting started.